So here's the skinny, folks. I got the car in the shop. I got everything laid out that I need laid out so I can get after doing this air ride kit. And for those of you wondering, the Kenny Bell blower, the project is still a go. I'm just waiting on parts. So if anybody's got the ear of Mike over at Kenny Bell, give him a nudge for me. Give him a call, give him an email, say, Mike, get the parts up to Gary at Castle Customs. Air ride. Okay. So I've been doing a little mapping here, trying to figure out how I want to run all of the auxiliary equipment that's going to run these airbags and air struts. And this is kind of what I've come up with. My big focus here is I want to try to maintain as much trunk space as possible and obviously make all of this look good and function. So this is kind of where I'm at. I'm essentially going to run these lines. Well, you can see how they've come up in here and kind of tucked into this channel at the top side of my trunk. Well, I'm going to run my lines through here. Okay, they're going to shoot across, and well, I'll probably attach them to these whatever little sections of tin and run them over, and they're going to come all the way across over to this side and then dip down to my manifold. Okay, now the manifold I don't believe is going to go there. I believe it's going to go behind this tank, so I have essentially access to like run lines down and around and out to each one of the four corners. Also need to run, this is where the controller that runs the whole system plugs into. That's going to have to get shot into the interior and up near the driver's area, or at least be accessible from the driver's area. So now, in all of this being said, first thing that I have to do is I need to get rid of my torsion bars. I don't actually need to, but I want to. And I mentioned this in my last video. I've got the Fraser's Performance Customs gas shock and these beautiful CNC mounts. So I'll just finish off with a quick little demo for you guys now that both shocks are in. All right. Look at that, uptown. Okay folks, so in order to set all this up so I can actually get a proper measurement on this MDF that I'm going to be mounting all this stuff to, we need to set up this manifold and this air tank. Now, if you buy one of these AirTech air ride kits for a Foxbody, or I think any other car for that matter, I mean, I've only really done a search for Foxbody stuff, so I guess I can't speak to all other makes and models, but the information surrounding how to set up this manifold and your air tank is a little bit sparse. So AirTech has done a video, but it's for their AirTech Stage 2 Plus kit, which is a little bit of a different manifold setup. So anyway, for whatever that's all worth, I'm going to show you here how I've logicked my way through setting this up. Now, full disclosure, I'm no expert on any of this. I've just thought my way through it all. So you can see here, front left, front right, rear left, rear right. This is where you're going to be running these fittings into, okay, and you're going to be running the lines out to your respective corner of your car, okay? So on this side of things, there's these blank holes, and at first I was like, I don't know what these are for, right? Well, I come to realize, actually just last night, that in the gauge box, you think pretty big box for a single gauge, right? Well, turns out there's a lot more going on in behind this gauge in the box. So in here we've got more fittings to which go on the back side of the line that's going out to the corner of your car. Okay, so what happens here is the gauges are actually all electronic. I was of the assumption before digging into this as deep as I have that you're probably going to run an air line to an air reading gauge, right? Well, not the case. So they're all electronic, very slick, plug and play, literally. I think the only wire you need to connect is like power ground, you know, your illumination, things of that nature. So these guys are going on the back side of the corner that you're running your airline to, right? And that is going to talk to your gauge, which ultimately tells you how much air pressure you have in that corner. All right? So you're going to need 4 of these guys, right, in here. And again, the reason I'm going to all this trouble is because of clearance. Like, I don't want to, you know, start cutting this MDF, mounting things, and then get this manifold in there and realize that, oh no, I'm like way too close to the back of the seat of my car, and then I'm trying to do a 90 in a line that you don't want any bends in, right, as you're trying to run it into the fitting. So I just think it would be wise to set this all up first, right? So I'm going to be putting, again, all of these sensors on the back sides here so I know how much room I got to play with when I'm mounting this to the board, and then my tank's ultimately going to sit in front of it, okay? Actually, there's a little bit more on this manifold. So in the kit, you also get a whole bunch of these brass fittings. Now, I haven't quite logicked my way through all of them yet. There is some Teflon tape, and I'll be honest with you, this doesn't seem like the best Teflon tape. Like, you can quite literally see through it. So I'm going to be running some of my own Teflon, like, you know, proper Teflon, just because air leaks are not going to be a happy day in an air ride kit. But anyway, these brass fittings, again, I don't know if there's just extras or what's going on here. I haven't ran into too many situations where I'm going to need to use these, other than the fact that I'm going to be running 2 of these brass plugs on one end of my air in and exhaust in. So these are on both sides of the manifold. Okay, so I'm going to be Teflon taping these, plugging these guys off. I mean, possibly this one exhaust one might come out, and maybe you run 2 exhausts. I haven't, in all honesty, got to that point yet, but you do definitely want to plug your double in off, because what's going to happen here is my compressor or compressors are both going to plug into this tank, and then I'm going to have a line out going in to my manifold, right? I guess maybe you would have 2 ins if you weren't running a tank and just trying to run a system off of 2 compressors. I don't know. That seems a little ridiculous to me, but all I know is I'm going to have 2 ins for my compressors, and I think I'm going to utilize, so all this hardware I'm showing you has been supplied in the kit. I'm going to run one of these elbows here, so line in for my compressor, the other line in for my compressor. I'm going to have a line out of my tank going into my manifold, and then there's this guy, again, supplied. This is your pressure switch, okay, and this is what tells your compressors to turn off or turn on based on how much PSI is in your tank. This guy is on at 165 PSI, off at 200 PSI. So that is going to plug into my tank, and then that actually plugs all 4 of these holes, right? 2 compressors in, pressure switch, and a line out to my manifold. Yeah. Now on the bottom side of this tank is yet another hole, okay? Now what I'm gonna do here, and this is just me being me, it's not anything that's recommended by the kit or whatever, but I'm gonna run one of these male-female brass fittings in here for two reasons. One will be so I can drain moisture out of this tank, right? Because this is gonna be mounted like this, so that'll be my low point. I'm gonna run like a quick connect, an air compressor fitting, or pardon me, air hose fitting on here. And then I can run like a, well, one, I could fill up a tire potentially on the side of the road. And two, I can just use that air line to run it outside of my tank, and I can actually drain off any moisture that's in this tank. So somewhat double duty. Again, this is just me being me. It's not anything that you have to do here. You could run a brass plug in here, but I kind of like the idea of having the auxiliary air, if you will. Okay folks, one critical component that I didn't mention in my last ramble here is this water trap, okay? This is supplied in the AirTech Stage 2 kit. It's a nice little water trap. It's actually, so you can thread it apart. There's a little bit of an element in there and a water catch. It's almost like a catch can if you're familiar with those. I also mentioned to you earlier that, you know, there's maybe more brass fittings than a person needs. Well, surprise, surprise, you need a threaded male-to-male to run this water trap. So the threaded male-to-male is going to thread into the tank, and then ultimately the water trap's going to thread on here. Okay, so here's the final product of my board for my compressor, and actually I got to talk to you about this, my relay solenoid. So we'll get this guy over here and I'll show you. I'm going to map this all out. So compressor will sit something like that, and then this solenoid relay, whatever you want to call it, it dawned on me while I was cutting this all out, I'm going to need some real estate for this as well. So this guy is going to get mounted in here, which is this little indent here is kind of shock tower. So I think, yeah, I should have more than enough room to mount this here, run my power wire and ground and everything in here, come up to my pressure switch, and then off to my compressors. At least in theory. A lot of test fitting going on right now, so let's see how this all flanges up. Okay, so holes are drilled. I got my Rivnuts in there. Okay, so this, I went about doing it this route because, well, obviously I don't want to be trying to hold a nut from the bottom side. I also don't want to be, you know, bumping this too far off the carpet so it sits all funny. This way I can just run a bolt down into it and hold it down. Now, for those of you that don't know, I mean, our first time seeing a Rivnut gun, this one's nothing fancy. I got it on Amazon. Essentially what a Rivnut looks like is this, okay? So think of a rivet, and then it kind of squashes down on itself and holds itself in place. These work a lot better in metal, especially if you want them to bite really good and hold a decent load. In wood, especially MDF, you don't want to be, you know, really yarding on them. You saw me just do kind of one pull of the Rivnut gun. I'm not obviously trying to hold anything. I just want this to stay stable. If you pull on them too hard, you'll pull them right through the wood, or you'll squash the MDF wide open. But anyway, they sit in there nicely and they'll work perfect with the little bit of torque that I put on them to hold all of my stuff in place. So now that I got the Rivnuts in there, I'm going to get after wrapping this in carpet. bolted up and ready to go in the car. This is that hose I was telling you guys about that I think I'm going to run from here over to my manifold. But I'll give you a quick look at this in the car as well. Maybe some light here. Yeah, sits in there pretty good. Out of the way. Can run all my wires in the back of it and lines for my manifold without too much difficulty. And I mentioned to you earlier, this is where my drain / auxiliary air line is going to be. I'll just have a quick connect air chuck there, and I don't know, maybe we'll pack a hose around in one of the rear fender well compartments. Okay folks, upon closer inspection, I've decided to go a little bit of a different direction. And yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of classic for doing this, but whatever, maybe you are too. So I was gonna initially mount this on my amp rack. I've decided against that. I'm now going to mount it to the board. So about the only thing you've missed here is 4 screws getting ran in. I'm just plugging these wire harnesses in. These ultimately go to the front of the car to talk to the gauges. It's just I'm doing this now because it gets a little tight once the the air tank's in here. You'll see what I mean in a second here. I've ran my hose. This is actually running this line that's going to go to my manifold is what's ultimately made me rethink where I want to put this. I was mentioning earlier I might run it off a quick connect. Well, sitting here looking at it, I'm like, you know what? Let's just mount her on the board. So, and like I say, it's very tight, so I'll give you a little tour here. It's all gonna, it doesn't quite tuck underneath the tank, but it sits in here real, whatever, nicely, I guess. Everything can still function as it should, okay? I've swapped where my inlet's gonna run, so now my hose is coming over and it's gonna go in this side here, like so. Yeah, I just, like I say, I overthought it maybe, possibly, but I just want this to be a very slick unit that can slide in and out of the car easily. And so to do that, now all I have to do is have enough line going to each one of my 4 corners and or my gauges in order to slide this out of the trunk and service whatever needs to be serviced back here. Potentially, in theory, you shouldn't have to service anything, but yeah, just thought I'd take you along for the tour here. So stand by, I'll get this all tightened up and we'll get out with the compressors. Let's try this out. Okay folks, here's a look at what my compressor situation is going to look like. Not bad, I guess, right? For a guy that doesn't really know what he's doing with woodworking and or upholstery. And one more time on the tank. I think I'm pretty happy with how this all went in. I'm going to look at mounting this a little bit more securely. I'll maybe explain a little bit more of what I'm thinking on that later. This guy, I don't know. I think he's gonna be just fine sitting the way it is. I haven't strapped that down to the trunk at all. It's just kind of a bit of a press fit in there, so I think that'll work. And again, I talked about this earlier, but I'm gonna route my lines up in there. Obviously, you know, pretty these up and probably even tie my wiring in and along there, because this is gonna have to travel around and back to that solenoid or relay. So yeah, overall I think that turned out quite well. I'm happy with it anyway. All right, folks, it's 1:45. I feel like I'm back down in Texas at the infamous Projects place doing shitbox stuff, and I guess in a roundabout way, I am doing shitbox stuff. It's just I'm working on my own shitbox. So the more I think about this install, the more I think it should be broken down into 3 different steps. First and foremost being what I've done here, okay? Mapping everything out, getting all your hardware mounted. Step number 2 being run all your wires, run all your lines. Step number 3, it's late, being put your struts in, put your bags in, put your shocks in, tie it all in, and go. And the reason I say all that is, if you do these steps in any other format, you're gonna incapacitate your car. Or you're just gonna be slapping it all in the trunk, treating your trunk like a junk drawer, slamming the lid and forgetting about a whole bunch of whatever, mounting and prettying up your trunk, okay? So I'm gonna leave this one here. Now, something that you can, I guess, somewhat look forward to is, I didn't talk about this in my video, but I am painting Matthew Puzzi over at Tech Motion. He 3D prints these, sells them in his Etsy store. These are HVAC vent gauge pods, okay? And they go in the center 2 vents of your Foxbody dash. So I'm gonna be running my air gauges in those. I'm gonna show you how to wire those all up. That'll be all part and parcel of step 2, which will be wiring and plumbing all our lines, all right? Anyway, like I say, I won't bore you any longer. This is a lot of information. I hope this helps if you're thinking about putting air ride in your Fox, or potentially maybe this has helped someone else out there without a Fox body, but they got a stage 2 air tech kit, and this will help you see how that manifold gets plumbed and wired and whatever else in your tank and everything. So enough from me. I can't even make sense anymore. Thanks so much for tagging along, guys. I really appreciate you. I'll chat with you in the comments. Take care. Bye for now.